The Kabbalah of the Big Bang Theory is the topic we'll be discussing. Today was the 18th of Elul, of the Hebrew month of Elul, which is the birthday of the two great luminaries, who were both born on a Wednesday, when there was the creation of the two luminaries. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, and his predecessors, and his student, the Alter Rebbe, two great mystics. Rabbi Zalman of Liadi and the Baal Shem Tov before him were born on this day. These two mystics developed a comprehensive approach to life, to the theology, the psychology, in one holistic unit of understanding life in the deepest levels and the most practical levels. So what better topic to address since recently, the last decades, you can say, even almost a century, the Big Bang Theory is the prevalent explanation of the creation of the universe, from a singularity to what they call an expanding or inflating universe. And though it's less than a century old, this theory, and has been developed, and there's still many issues that need to be resolved, when you look into the teachings of Kabbalistic writings, and especially as they're presented in by the Hasidic masters, you'll find a tremendous parallels, fascinating parallels, and I would submit them. We'll discuss this, ideas that can resolve actually some of the puzzles and some of the problems that still exist with the Big Bang Theory. So that is what we're going to address, and what better way to honor these two great mystics, the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, and Rabbi Zalman of Liadi. So the general theory goes like this, that the universe as we see it today was once a more concentrated entity, to the point that there was what they call it infinite space or time, a singularity where it all began, and that's called the Big Bang, that began a process which expanded and turned into a universe as we know it today. Obviously, I am not a scientist, and I'm not going to go into all the details of this. You can look it up, but it's the prevalent theory in understanding the universe. What's fascinating about it is, up till that point, what was the standing theory? Was either the universe, like Aristotle taught, was forever here, and just forever in time, which of course, as Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, and others questioned, then what exactly changed that suddenly made the universe become as we know it? That was the one way to look at it, or based on faith and the biblical approach that God created the universe, and that's what set it in motion. The Big Bang Theory, for many, actually is just another confirmation of a divine force. As a matter of fact, Einstein was bothered by this theory because it meant if there's a beginning, then there's a beginner, someone who began the process. But there are also the radical or not so radical atheists who believe that the creator is superfluous once you have the Big Bang. But that goes back to the same question. When you see the elegance of the universe, is it God that implanted this elegance, or is it what they call nature? It really can end up being just semantics, because at the end of the day, it does have the magnificence and the power and the beauty that we see. So to go back to the Big Bang Theory, the Big Bang Theory is essentially that it was not just an eternal universe, but there was a point, a singularity. There's no theories that develop what was before the singularity, before the Big Bang. But from the Big Bang going forward, the process was that think of it like a seed or one cell that exploded in some fashion and began to develop and multiply and grow and expand. And the universe as we know it now, as that theory goes, is 13 billion years or so since that moment. Scientists are trying to recreate those early moments and try to hear the echoes of the Big Bang by accelerating particles and bringing them to a place and trying to emulate what existed and what happened during those few first moments. But there are theories in the Big Bang Theory, of course, itself, many different ways to explain it. But essentially, it does seem that the consensus is that time and space were born and created then. So to ask the question, as Stephen Hawking says, to ask the question, what existed before that, it would be like asking the question, what is south of the South Pole? There's nothing south of the South Pole. So there is no time and space prior to the Big Bang. And how that's explained in the context, obviously it's all theories because nobody was there. But regardless, Big Bang going forward, as I just mentioned, explains the universe as how it developed from that singularity to what we call the expanding universe. There's also different theories. What will happen at the end? Will it continue to expand? Will it stop expanding? Will it contract again? And so on. What I want to touch upon, however, is I think something that will put into context, and I have no doubt in my mind, say something radical, that if you understand the mystical take on creation, it could tremendously revolutionize even the science of it. And as I said before, fill in gaps and fill in details that are not understood or remain mysteries in the present theory as scientists understand it. So let's talk about it on several levels. And of course, the big question that the mystics ask, the big question is, how does a God, which is completely infinite, and the word infinite is even not an appropriate word, it's completely beyond anything that we understand as existence, the words of Maimonides and the words of different Hasidic masters, a God that is built to Metzias Nimtza. Metzias built to Metzias Nimtza means an undefined and a non-existential type of existence. How does from that become an existence as we know it? And an existence that has its independent identity. You and I, right now, wherever we may be, are speaking to each other, listening to each other, and we sense ourselves with our own self-contained identities, individuality. So if this omnipresent and all-prevalent God, how does this shift take place? To say that it just so-called God wills it, and it evolved from God creation. Creation and God are so different. The creator and the creation are so infinitely apart. You cannot say from infinity, even in the infinite set of numbers, you can't say that infinity evolves into finite. So it's true, you can go by faith and believe that God can do whatever he wants, and he just created it. But we know that God created the universe with a logic. And as a logic, the logic that God created it with, how do we understand this shift? More importantly, as the mystics focus on, it's not just about how the creation takes place. How does the creation reconnect with its creator? It's one thing you could say God put it in place, but there's a purpose to it all. And the purpose is that there should be some partnership, there should be some reunion or union between creator and creation. So the question is, how do we climb the steps and return when there's this infinite gap and beyond infinite gap, because you can't even compare the two in any way. So this is something that the Kabbalists throughout the centuries, throughout history, tried to understand and tried to figure out, and had their own challenges. Some went with the approach that God, the essence of God, essentially remains apart from everything, and whatever we know about existence and creation is a certain segment that God created, but that segment never really has a relationship with the essence of the divine. The problem with that is, of course, then there's no relationship ultimately with God himself on his terms. Others go with the approach that, yes, it is God that put everything in creation, but creation can never really touch the essence because of the reasons I said, because of the insurmountable gap. Comes the Arizal. The Arizal who lived in the 16th century, Tzfat, and he came and radically and introduced a radically new idea called the Sod HaTzimtzum, the secret of the Tzimtzum. Basically, the Tzimtzum would be the first type of radical shift, a quantum leap, that the process of how the divine shifts from a divine to allow the space for existence to begin is, yes, through a big bang. But it's not a big bang with noise, it's not a big bang with thunder, it's not a big bang in the literal sense of the word, it's big bang as in a radical shift, a leap, a jump. Because that's the key thing to balance the equation of a divine and a God that is completely beyond existence, and an existence that is so far apart, you need some shift. If you don't have the shift, you then have to resort to one of the other two explanations I gave earlier, which is either God is not involved in the process directly, the essence of God, or the essence of God is involved, but the creation really is just unable to really connect to there, and we have to basically annihilate ourselves, obliterate ourselves to have any relationship with the divine. But for there to be a true union, a integrated union between the divine and creation, between the divine and existence, between transcendence and existence, is not possible under those two theories. Whereas with Arizal's concept, by the Tzimtzum means the power of the divine to utterly conceal himself, to utterly conceal itself and create a space. And as the Rizal explains it, that it's think of it like a black hole, a space. And he makes it very clear, we'll soon elaborate more on this, that this space is specifically round because it has to be equanimity, has to be equal for it to be able to create a structure that will be even. It can be like a square, it can be like a triangle, it has to be like a circle. I'll elaborate soon about that as well. So essentially, and this is of course is just a metaphorical. So the infinite divine consciousness filled all of reality. Then he removed and concealed. Tzimtzum means to conceal. He concealed the lower dimensions of that consciousness. In a sense, drew it back within himself. Think of it like a master teacher before conveying an idea withdraws and has a moment of silence, or more than a moment, draws all the ideas back within himself, and then left the space for another entity, another consciousness to emerge. This is a radical leap, because divine consciousness requires some type of exerted force to withhold the flow. That takes a willpower and energy that may be even stronger than the energy to reveal. Think of it like a great teacher. It's being silent exerts more energy. The restraint requires more energy than exuding, than flow. So that's the first radical leap and the first so-called Big Bang. Now, what happens now to this space? And the space remains a residue. Because you can't say it's utterly black. It remains a residue. It's called the Rishimu, a residue or an impression, different terms for it. Something remains, but you cannot really, it's not distinct, it's not clear. Meaning it's like somewhat almost like when you write something on a paper and then you erase it, so you can make out some type of sign of something, but you cannot really read it. Then comes the next step, he says. A kav, a thin ray of light from this light that was around this black hole, emerges a thin ray of light called the kav chut, the line, the thread, and this thread will thread all of existence. All of existence, and it's in an orderly fashion. And this goes back to the circle and the line. We know today the essential language is zeros and ones. Here you got the first 0 and 1. The 0 is like a black hole space, and the 1 is a line. Line creates a hierarchy, creates structure. We know we live in an existence of time and space. There's structure. So if it was just a circle, a black hole, it would not have structure. Everything is equal. On the other hand, the reason for the circle, as the Arizal says, is because if you want to have a hierarchy, you need to have an equidistance, that everything existing is equally distant. If it was a square, the place that was the farther corners of the square, the angles, would be farther from the center than the edges of the square. If it was a triangle, the same would be of any other. A circle creates an equanimity, an equality, that within this space now can come this thin line and create. And we'll soon talk about the evolution of this creation itself. So now we have is the following. We have the first radical leap, the first quantum leap from a complete divine other reality, higher reality that we cannot relate to, has now exercised a power of restraint, a power of concealment, tzimtzum, that allows for another entity to emerge. However, there's one problem. Because of this radical leap, we have to ultimately balance this inequality. We have to balance this equation. It resolves the issue of how existence emerges, how existence is created, but it does not resolve how they reconnect. So then comes an evolutionary process that was called the Seder Hishtalshlus. Seder Hishtalshlus is an evolutionary process, level by level, step by step, that goes into the issue of creating a structure. But how does it work? it works very similar to, let's take in a microcosm, the human being, like the one cell, when there's the conception of a new child, it's a one cell. The egg is fertilized by the sperm, by the seed, and a cell emerges. And this cell will begin to split. The same is in the way, on the macrocosmic level, the way the worlds work. It all begins in a concentrated form. You can say, in that black hole, everything that will ever come to existence is going to emerge from there, from that residue. However, you need a catalyst, which is the light, the thin ray of light that awakens that impression that remains there. So the koyach ha'ein sof, the power of the divine infinite, is there, but it's in a concealed fashion. Now begins a slow process of, like the spoon feeding of a teacher begins the slow flow. That's the kav, the thin ray of light that starts creating. But how does it create? It doesn't create in a moment. It's a process. It's a process that begins with a concentrated seed and begins to expand. So the first state is called Adam Kadman, the primordial man. The primordial man is like that concentrated seed. You cannot even speak in terms of structure, even though everything will come from there, because it's still in a conceptual, archetypal, concentrated form. Then comes the next level, it's called Akudim. Akudim means 10 energies in one container. So now a container has emerged, a speck, but it's still 10 energies all in that one container. If you look at a fetus in its first week, you still cannot to make out any limbs, any organs, and so on. But it's all will emerge. After Akudim comes Nikudim. Nikudim is what? 10 points in 10 containers. However, they're still very intense because, remember, we're talking about a balance here. The energy represents the divine consciousness from before the Tzimtzum. The Kav, which is bringing the light into the so-called container, represents existence. Existence, as we know it, and beyond the existence of the divine, are not compatible. That's why you needed the Tzimtzum in the first place. So it's a very delicate balance to maintain. How do you have that the light doesn't overwhelm the energies? So in the early stages, the issue is not an issue because it's all concentrated in a form where time and space and everything that will come is all in one concentrated seed. Fine. But once it begins to develop, either the containers become overwhelmed the energy, or the energy will overwhelm the containers. And that's what happens in that second stage. Or you could say third stage, Nukudim, which is where the energies are still too intense and the containers are still too delicate. So what happens? The next process of the Big Bang, Shvira Takelim, the shattering of the containers, because the light and the energy is too intense. In a way, you can say it's the market correction and the balancing of the equation of the Tzimtzum. Because you see, the Tzimtzum did created space for reality to emerge, but as I said before, it was at the price of concealing the divine. So somewhere this has to give. Somewhere there needs to be a market correction. So the world of Toihu, the world of chaos, which is the second verse in the book of Genesis, refers to this world where the energies are too intense for the containers and the containers shatter. So here again you have an explosion that will shatter, but then will come the next stage. That explosion will then in turn lead to tikkun, which is the repair of the shattered containers. Which this is now a level where the energy gets more diminished. The containers now mature and get more developed. So now it's expanded even further. Now you have an expanded containers that are able to contain in a harmonious, balanced, symmetrical way the energies. So there you have the first stages of both a Big Bang, which is the Tzimtzum that creates the radical leap. That in turn creates a situation where you have to begin the development that goes an expanding development until you have the full-blown universe as we know it, existence as we know it. Now remember, all this is still in a spiritual state. But this plays itself out, as I mentioned, a microcosm in our own personal lives. Take the development of a child. Take the development of a seed into a tree, of any creature. But let's use a human fetus. What happens? It begins with a father and mother who provide seed and egg, and it's a miraculous thing, but in some way, when they join, and God's blessing, it conceives a child. But you don't begin with a child. You begin with one cell. That cell is not even visible. And no one even knows what's going to come from it. If you looked at it, you wouldn't have a clue. You wouldn't even be able to see it and discern it. But in that cell is a concentrated power. So you have the process of the Big Bang, which creates, first of all, the conception itself is a result of a radical leap that God blessed a seed and an egg to join and conceive of life. But it's only a life in a very concentrated form. Then begins the development of the 9 months of gestation. There's the first trimester, the second trimester, the third trimester. And each stage, what do you see happening? What you see happening is the development and expansion. Yes, not the expansion as we have it on the macrocosmic level, but still an expansion, and a fetus begins to shape. And you can actually discern the different months. First the heart, the brain, then the limbs, and all the organs. And there you have a full-blown child 9 months later emerges. Didn't come from nowhere. It emerged, it all was in a concentrated form. And one of the beautiful concepts in Jewish mystical thought especially is microcosm, macrocosm. Whatever you see in the microcosm of the individual, you can speak about Elam Katan Adam, the human being is a small universe, and the universe is a large organism. So exactly as a child is conceived and develops into conceived from one cell and expands and develops into a full-blown child, the same as in the larger universe. It all begins with that one concentrated cell, and that then which includes all time and space. That's Ak, Adam Kadman, Beskira Achas, with one glance. It's like a blueprint. That in one snapshot, you have the entire reality, everything that will come from it, everything in time and space, but then needs the process of actually developing time and space. And time and space evolve first in a state of 10 energies in one container. Still, you can't call it that time, you can't call it hierarchy because it's 10 energies in one container. Think of it like one cell, but or that has everything in it. Then the cells split into 10 containers, 10 energies, but they're still too intense for each other. So you need another market correction type of Big Bang, that the shattering of the containers in order, livnis, a shattering in order that to bring a joining together and a repair. Now it's interesting, which we'll talk about some more on a personal level, is that we are part of this process. This isn't just a divine process. This is the divine process of how it came into being, but we'll soon talk about our role in this. But before I go there, this then turns into tikkun, which is called the world of Atzilus. What's interesting is that this process continues a number of times. Think of it like a hologram. It happens on a general level, then it happens on a more specific level. And Atzilus, the process is again, from Atzilus to Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, where you may have heard these words, the 4 worlds. So Atzilus, there's a macrocosmic Atzilus, that's the energy before the Tzimtzum. There's a macrocosmic Bria, which means creation, Yetzirah means formation, Asiya means a full-bodied entity. Then you have the microcosm, Atzilus and microcosm, Bria and microcosm, Yetzirah and Asiya and microcosm. What essentially are these 4 levels? Atzilus is like the vision of reality. Bria is the cell, but it's all still in an outline form. It's in a concentrated form. Yetzirah gives shape, tzura, shape and distinction. And Asiya is the full-blown entity as it expands into a universe as we know it, and ultimately into the physical universe. So here you have, on a cosmic level, the dynamics of creation. You tell me, I believe that this what I've summed up here, especially when you look in the sources, in the Eitz Chaim of the Arizal, and explained in the Hasidic discourses. As I said, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, whose birthday is today, you have a most comprehensive and elegant picture of what is called the Big Bang. The Big Bang, as a matter of fact, when it's described, doesn't have all these details. So I would challenge and submit that all of us should try to bring together scientists and mystics and try to compare notes and see what can be gleaned from these ideas of the Arizal and the mystical teachings that can actually inform Big Bang theory, and not only inform it, but complement and add elements to it that still remain mysterious. So that's on that basic level. But I want to add something which is perhaps even more radical, even more important. And that's the personal touch. See, at the end of the day, science is trying to understand cosmology of creation, cosmology of the universe. But in Jewish thought, there's a certain beauty of everything being holistic. What does that mean? We can't really separate between the philosophy and the cosmology and the theology and the psychology and the emotional applications of all these ideas. Now, I know this is not an area science ventures into, but the mystics do. This whole discussion is not just theoretical. The way the divine put this creation to process, this creation process into action, is in order for us to be, because we are microcosms of that, in order for us to learn on a psychological, emotional level the same ideas applied to our personal lives. So here you have a whole other dimension where you can actually take all these ideas and resolve issues that we struggle with. Because we too have a big bang in our personal lives. And that big bang also goes through stages of evolution that begins in a singularity and expands and develops and goes through the shattering of containers, and then comes the tikkun. So let's talk now about that side of the things. And that adds a whole other personal, as I said, a personal dimension and application of all these ideas in our life. Now, before I go there, I just want to add 1 or 2 points before we can go back. Let me go there and then we'll go back. Okay, we could always do that. So as I mentioned before, the human being is a small universe. The whole process that everything I've described happens within us. Let's start with our own childhood, with our own birth, our conception. Our conception began exactly as the universe began, as a one cell that was an outgrowth of what? Of all the forces that gave birth to us. Our parents, of course, are children of their parents. So ultimately, it's a divine force that allows to create, which really is necessary, even explaining the Big Bang, because at the end of the day, how did this Big Bang begin? No one has an answer to that. Yes, if you want to insist on cutting God out, which is what some people do, Carl Sagan, for example, when he made his introduction to Stephen Hawking's classic book, Brief History of Time, says that at the end of the day, Hawking was looking to understand the mind of God, and at the end of the day he comes to discover that time and space are all infinite, and the reality of existence has no need for a creator. I would submit the exact opposite. To understand Big Bang Theory, you need to understand what is the force that caused all this to happen. And that, on the contrary, helps us appreciate the process. Now, I understand the fear that scientists have of a personal God and having to be obligated to be accountable, etc., and everyone has that fear. But that doesn't take away from the fact that just to say the Big Bang, nature did it, nature is just another name for God. So the fact of the matter is, anyone who's born on this earth has to recognize the miracle and magic of birth. And we're not self-made people. It didn't just happen. Yes, our parents loved each other, joined in a union, or intimate, but that still doesn't explain how human beings can create. So the way we explain it is that God implanted, just like He implanted the Big Bang and the expanding universe that came as a result of it, all implanted in the Tzimtzum, as I discussed before, and the steps that followed. Same thing on a personal level. Each of us began with a conception. That conception was very concentrated, like a seed. That seed then developed and expanded into ultimately into a full-blown child, emerging in this world. The umbilical cord is cut. And then we continue to grow. We continue to grow in our young formative years and early years. Growth continues even on a physical level till age 20 to age 25, and in many ways continues forever, through our lifetimes. What I mean by forever, I mean throughout our lifetimes. So growth is part of the process of how something develops. Now, we grow physically, we grow physiologically, we grow emotionally, we grow intellectually, we grow spiritually. All this is a process, but all growth, because you're dealing with two entities, how you are, where you come from, and where you are, there's always going to be the tenuousness and the challenge of balance. Like you see, for example, on a very basic level, when the fetus begins to develop, there's one of the miracles of this is that it develops exactly the right pace. Please God, obviously, there are aberrations and tragedies and mutations and all kinds of other problems that can happen. But so many healthy children do develop, and it requires a perfect balance. if the organs develop too quickly, or the forces that are causing them to grow emit too many hormones or too many chemicals or enzymes and so on, you can have the disaster. So there needs a balance. This balance will be necessary throughout life. But there will be times where there'll be transitions, where there'll be big bangs, or you could say smaller big bangs, smaller tremors. Like let's take when the child has to emerge from the womb. Well, it doesn't come easily because the child in the womb, it fitted snugly, it developed there, it grew, the mother's belly grew incommensurate and allowing the space for the child. But now the child has to leave through a very narrow canal, which is actually part of the pressure that helps the child develop certain skills like breathing and other things that pressure. But the child has to fit through this canal, and it is a certain transition. This transition requires the breaking of the water. There you go, another break, another type of big bang or small bang, but another type of tremor, so to speak. And the child emerges, the mother goes through great pain, this transition, but the pain leads to a birth. So the cracks, like the crack of an egg, in order to birth a new chick. The child emerges, and now there again comes, the umbilical cord has to be cut. There you have another transition. And then emotionally and psychologically, in the early stages of a child's life, they cling and they're very attached and very needy and dependent on their mother and father. But then slowly, and the mother's food. Till now, for 9 months, the child was drinking and eating everything the mother drank, and then now it has to begin to drink its own. It doesn't happen overnight, slowly. First it nurses, then it begins to eat solids, and slowly a process of becoming a separate entity. Exactly as it is on the macrocosmic level, a separate entity. And doesn't happen quickly. So you need the conception is like the first shift, the first quantum leap. The space created to allow creation, both a macrocosmic and microcosmic. Then begins the cell and its development and its expansion. And then begins, as it expands, the balance that's necessary. The first time a child begins to walk, they may fall. They begin to explore. There's always dangers involved. They begin to go, and the first day the child has to go to school, the child will often cry. There's a certain separation anxiety. And slowly, as any parent knows, throughout life, there's going to be many changes as the child goes the first time it goes to summer camp, the first time it leaves home. And then, of course, as the child turns into an adolescent and puberty and all the awkwardness and all the transitions that come. Constantly you see shifts, and those shifts always have some type of a little radical jump. If it's done healthy, we balance. Now, there will be shviras hakelim. There will be times where the energy and the containers are not compatible. And that can be the tantrum of a child. It can be the frustration of a young adult. It can be other forces where two things come in conflict. Am I an extension of my parents, or am I a separate entity on my own? These frustrations are all forms of, there will be something will shatter, but the shattering is in order to repair. That's the thing. So the shattering is a necessity. Why? It's a necessity whenever you have something growing from one place to the others, as the Hasidic and the Kabbalistic masters put it. You need ayin, yesh, ayin, yesh. Between any state of being, in order to grow to another state of being, you have to shed one layer of skin to assume a new layer of skin. That shedding is a form of another, like you can say, a mini Big Bang, a mini explosion. Now, they could be more extreme, they could be less extreme, but it's necessary in life. There's nobody that's not going to have some anxiety and some frustration when they begin to grow into an independent adult. And it happens in stages. But the ultimate thing we need to know is that it's all built to build harmony and balance in life, tikkun. And that tikkun is up to us. So here we come and understand what is our role. We have the power to balance the equation, to rebalance the equation that when I got out of whack, when the divine concealed itself in order to create existence. It was a necessary step. But Tzimtzum b'shvil hagilui. The concealment was in order to be revelation, in order for something independent to grow. But then becomes the balance, the battle between an independent identity and God. Look at this whole discussion about whether there's a God or whether we need a God once we have the Big Bang Theory or we have the theory of evolution. There alone you see the tenuous relationship between humans and God. So Judaism teaches, the mystics teach, the Hasidic masters teach, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe teach, that that's exactly what our role is to find peace between God and us. So because the universe was created an agnostic universe. That alone is the biggest Big Bang, is the biggest dissonance possible. But it was necessary to create an independent identity for us then to be able to use our free will and choose to reconnect and repair. It's like a child leaves home in order to come back home. The bird has to allow to fly to be able to come back to its nest. And that's where we play a critical role in the unfolding of the drama of this story. And what's that critical role? That we live in a world where we live in an agnostic world. It's easy for us to deny and say, you know what, I'm a self-made man, I'm a self-made person, I don't need anybody. You can live selfishly, narcissistically. Or you can realize and recognize, no. It doesn't make sense. We all come from a singularity. We all come from one place. Everything about us is really just an extension of what developed. Why not remember that we once were a cell? We were once a product of our parents. Where did this ego suddenly develop that we think we're completely self-contained and we don't need anybody? Everything, I'm a self-created person. The humility and the modesty and the recognition of our blessings teach us that it's not all about me. And that allows for an environment where we begin to appreciate each other and we begin to understand that we can all complement each other. And what we're essentially doing is reconnecting pieces. So we can live in a fragmented world, and we can be part of the problem by supporting and perpetuating the fragmentation. Or we can repair the fragments that have been broken by the shattering of the containers, both in the collective sense and the personal sense. Each of us goes through life when we have broken promises, shattered dreams, love lost, disappointments, betrayals, wounds, abuse. These are all big bangs of the negative sort that are part of a world that is not at peace with its purpose. When you have a dissonance between who you are and what you do, between the activities that you do in order to survive and the transcendental needs of understanding why are we here, that dissonance creates shattered and breakages. To the point, on a subtle level, it's just simply fragments. On a more extreme level, it's where people can hurt each other in the terrible ways. War, injustice, abuse, molestation, everything that we abhor is a product of the fragmentation that is not the natural state of reality, but it's a result of a big bang that created a radical leap, a quantum leap between existence and its source. And when a source and when an existence is detached from its source, you have the root of all problems. But the good news is that we have the ability to correct it. That's tikkun. How do we correct it? When we show love to another person, compassion, selflessness. We're doing with every selfless act, with every time we help someone, we go against the grain of our own narcissistic behavior. What do we do then? We're repairing one piece of the puzzle. And we're reconnecting the fragmented and diverse universe to the point of even divisive universe, to this point of singularity where it all began. And that's why God made it this way. That's why He didn't want to have, I created a world and go figure it out. I created it in a way that you can retrace your steps. You can go from Asiya to Yetzirah, which is to the shape and form, to Bria, the outline, the cell, to Atzilus, the vision of it all. You can go from, we use in the macrocosmic, we'll use from Vrudim, Tikkun, to Toyu, back to Akudim where there's 10 energies in one container, back to Ak where it's all one, as I said before, one image, one picture that has the entire time and space. We can reconnect to it all, and through that reconnect through the Kav, back to the the energy pre-Tzimtzum, which was preceded before the Big Bang. But in order to do so, we need to realize that there's steps. The Big Bang creates the beginning of the process that we can retrace. And once you get there, don't be foolish and understand and forget that the Big Bang came from somewhere. They tell the story in Chelm. Chelm was this small town of fools. And they lived, of course, in the olden days in the shtetl, there were no motorized vehicles. They used horse and buggy. But one day, after the trains were invented, in the mid-19th century, someone from Chelm visits the big town, and he sees a strange thing. He sees a vehicle, which is a train, a section of a train, that does not have a horse pulling it, but it's moving. He was amazed. He comes back to Chelm. He says, I found something. Some vehicles that move without horses pulling them. So they asked, how does it move? He says, there's another car behind it that pushes it. And what pushes the second car? A third car. And what pushes the third car? A fourth car. And how many cars? What about the last car? I forgot to ask, or I didn't notice. That's the same idea. The Big Bang, yes, pushes and expands to a universe that we see. But what pushed the Big Bang? In those old fairy tales, they say the earth sits on the back of an elephant, but stands on the top of a turtle, and the turtle is on top of some other creature. But what's on the bottom of it all? So there's a force that is a divine force that is divine, but the divine envisions existence as it will be. This is essentially what's called the 10 hidden spheres, Shir Atzmei B'Koyach, that God allocates and estimates. What I mentioned before, the Atzilus, the Klolos, the macrocosmic Atzilus. It's the vision of existence. But that vision is too powerful. So that fills all the reality. The Tzimtzum is the Big Bang. It creates the first radical quantum leap that that clears the space. Yes, an impression remains there, but for all practical purposes, it's a clear space for an independent consciousness to emerge. And the rest of the evolution as I described. But we play the role of recognizing this, of understanding this, and reconnecting the dots, each in our own way. So there you have a tremendous, and I would say extremely eloquent, and I hope I did justice to some of it at least, eloquent picture of how creation comes into place, and how we retrace the steps of reconnecting the parts back to that singularity, back to that unity, back to the Hashem Echad, exactly, in the Shema, in the liturgy, the most famous liturgy, the unity, the divine unity that connects it all. Now, there are many more details in each of these steps, but I think I gave the general picture of it all. And a lot of this, as I said, is based on teachings, especially the Alter Rebbe, who elaborates. The Baal Shem Tov spoke his words in brief. His students documented it. But later the Alter Rebbe, the Maggid, his student, and then the Alter Rebbe, the student of the Maggid, developed it into a full comprehensive approach, which is called Chassidus Chabad. So what better way, as I said, to honor this 18th of Elul in this context of understanding the Kabbalah of the Big Bang theory. Now, what you come away with all of this is that not just that we understand the Big Bang, it also applies to our lives, and we play a role in actually doing something about it. That's ultimately what the purpose of it all is. It's not just theories of how the cosmology of existence, the cosmology of the universe, but it all comes down to the psychology and emotional life that we live. Now, in our psychology, many of us know, we go to therapy for what? For fragmentation. We go to therapy for anger. We go to therapy for different forces that split us apart in our own psyches. And the goal is, of course, is to reconnect and unite. So you have, in a way, what you have now is the cosmology of the human psyche as well, which is a reflection and parallels the cosmology of the larger universe. And they both interact. And it's interesting. When you make the repairs in your little world, you also repair the macrocosm. As Maimonides writes, connected to these days when we're going into the new year, he writes that a person has to see himself and the entire universe as equally balanced, good and bad. And your one act, can tip the scale and bring redemption to yourself and the universe. And today, with the concept of ripple effect, the butterfly effect, we see again, one act, one small thing, can have an impact on a very massive scale, especially over time. So the same idea of the universe expanding and it all going back to one singularity, same as in our actions. One action that we do has the power to impact that entire universe. And the Big Bang is the best proof of it, because that's exactly how the whole universe emerged, was from one specific small but very concentrated time and space. Some call it infinite time and space, however you define it, and it's developed into what we see here today. So we shouldn't be deceived in thinking that the universe is this made up of a bunch of random parts and fragments. It's actually one unified whole that can appear to us in our own myopic perspective, from our myopic view, as a here and now. But they all connect back to the original here and now as it was at the beginning of it all. Okay. On a practical level, as we stand in the 18th of Elul, which is close to the end of the year, it says also 12 more days till Rosh Hashanah. So every day corresponds to a month of the year. So now today we look back at what we did at the beginning of the year, Tishrei. On the second day, on the 19th of El, we look at Cheshvan. In my book, 60 Days, I enumerate it more in detail. But the point is that what better way to look at the universe and ourselves on this 18th of Elul, 18 also is Chai, gives life and sustenance, is to look at it that we have the opportunity now to both correct things that we could have improved over the past year, and most importantly, set the stage and the tone for the coming year, that it should be a year of blessing and a year of repair and a year of unity. And we have that power. So these lessons actually apply themselves to our given situation. And all of us, whoever we may be, have that ability to achieve that type of unity. So, as I said, I hope it did justice to the concept, and I'm sure there's more to talk about in this whole discussion. And may this be a one step of one contribution toward the understanding of the integration of all the different ologies, cosmology, psychology, philosophy, theology. All the ologies come together in one holistic picture and understand how it all really is a process that helps us understand ourselves and helps us grow and helps us retrace the steps and reconnect to those first moments. So yes, the echoes of the Big Bang can be heard. The tremors can be felt if you listen closely. If you look at your life and you see your life as a process, we're not what's the word I want to use? We're not separate fragments. It's a flow. Life is a mobile flow from yesterday till today till tomorrow. And we often look at it as, we say, okay, what are we doing now? But it's not the here and now. It's a part of a flow. We are part of a past, and we're going toward a future, and we're in the present. It's a continuous flow, and that flow goes back, and it's all connected. So whatever happened 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, is impacting us today, and what happens today is impacting that. And what will happen tomorrow is being impacted by us today, and vice versa. So when you see it that way, and you see all time and space as one continuum, that also helps us realize how when we do something, we actually have the impact, just like a player in a symphony. It may be one player, but how you play your fiddle, how you play your instrument is impacting the entire symphony. So God bless us all with a blessed year, and let's use the last 12 days properly, and especially with the power that we get from these great mystics and Rebbes and sages, Baal Shem Tov, the Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, and Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Yadi, the Alter Rebbe. And we will continue this class will be next week, which will be a pre-Rosh Hashanah class. And then I'll announce the schedule as we go to the holiday season. Some classes obviously will be Wednesdays, will be holidays. I believe Yom Kippur is on a Wednesday. But Rosh Hashanah is Monday and Tuesday, so there will be a class after Rosh Hashanah. This has been Rabbi Jacobson talking to you about the Kabbalah of the Big Bang Theory. Please, if you have any questions, comments, rebuttals, anything, send them into our email at meaningfullife.com. Let us know who you are, where you are. If you're using the 60 days, the daily emails. If you aren't, you can subscribe to these daily emails that we send out every day with an exercise, a thought, and just stay in touch in every possible way. Again, everyone be blessed, be well.